Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode. Uh, your host Fabian Vera. Right now, with a particular person that I wanted to meet for a long time, Ehlig-Economides. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, today is a special day as we have a sunny sunset here in the city of Houston. People may ask what is behind us. Maybe you can tell us what is behind us, right?
Well, maybe some people recognize it. That's downtown Houston behind us.
Exactly. It's a sunny afternoon of the day before Thanksgiving of 2021, and a lot has transpired through the last 24 months. I wanted to record this episode not only for the purpose of documentation, but also to say thank you for a journey that lasted more than I expected. Right now, there is people traveling. There is, I believe, relatives that are going to meet you in the following days because.
Yeah, well, I meeting them, and they're meeting me. Yeah, they're around.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had a big Thanksgiving family thing, picnic on Sunday. The family is so big that we can have one big thing, but it can't be on Thanksgiving Day because they want smaller, independent family.
Oh yeah.
On the Thanksgiving Day, so. That's why we always met on Fridays. You remember when you used to come to the Friday after Thanksgiving?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fabulous
That's why
time.
it was after, because you gotta have the Sunday thing, and then you gotta have the day of the day thing, and then you gotta have to have the after.
Do you still have that one going on?
Currently, we don't. We did it once since I moved here, and it's a little tricky to do it in a high rise. We always did it in the big house before, right? But now Alex and Elizabeth have a house, and so they decided this year they weren't quite ready to try something like that, but maybe next year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For people who usually will watch this for the first time, they may say, I know Fabian for a while. The first time I see this lady, who is this lady talking to you? This lady happens to be the first PhD woman in the whole world to acquire a petroleum degree, doctorate level. But tell us more about your journey when you decided to be from Indiana, right? To the south and then to Palo Alto, California.
Well, yeah, and a few other places in between. Yeah, no, I was actually born in Texas. I'm a native East Texan, so some people think that's why I ended up a petroleum engineer.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. Yeah, I have to correct you a little bit. I'm the first American born to get a PhD in petroleum engineering, because there is one more ahead of me, a woman who is from Turkey.
Oh, okay.
So she was just a couple of years ahead of me, and there's one absolutely right behind me, also born in America, who's quite famous. So, yeah, it's a small group, the women PhDs in that time frame. So anyway, we did go when I was very young to Delaware and then Indiana, where I spent my formative years. So I was there from like 10 years, from like 3 until 12, something like that. And then we moved back to Texas. So I went to high school back here. And you're right, I did go to Palo Alto, but before that, I was also at the University of Kansas. So I have a couple of degrees from there, and then finally did go and got petroleum engineering PhD at Stanford.
Before you went to Kansas and finally at Palo Alto, there was a school that is actually close to where we are right now. That you happen to have also an experience there, right?
Yeah. No, if we look out this direction instead of behind us, we see Rice University. And in fact, straight to the west, we are very close also to the Texas Medical Center. So yes, my first college degree was from Rice University.
And some people may say ambitious, other people they say they try to be more and more educated because the pursuit of knowledge is always a daily endeavor. Now we are facing new challenges for the oil and gas and the energy industry as a whole that was very different from the 80s and the early 90s. Which are the similarities you see right now, and which are the main differences?
Well, we did have a major downturn in price in the 80s that people who have as much years experience as I do definitely remember, and not fondly. It was a really tough time, and we've been through recently a major oil price drop around 2013, but it's an interesting reason why that happened, and it helps me answer your question in a very different way, because we have the similarity of downturn, but we have enormous technical differences in why. Enormous. Because in the 80s, Aramco just increased the supply, and this was a big reason for the global drop in oil price. But this time, the supply increase actually happened in the United States, and it happened in reservoirs with permeabilities that are a million times smaller than the permeability of Gawar in Saudi Arabia. So it's incredible, technically, what has happened in the United States since around, I'd say, starting maybe around 2005, but really ramping up by 2008, and so much success that by 2013 we had a glut in oil supply, global glut, and that's what drove prices down. Of course, recently the industry is heavily impaired by demand drop due to the pandemic. So the oil industry is in an interesting position right now, because there are also strong drivers to try to see if we can find another way for an energy future that's not so dominated by the fossil fuels. So right or wrong, it's there. And so I don't know how much impact that's going to have. Some people say when the demand goes back up, we're going to have the same issue. Push to keep up with the demand for the oil and gas. Others say investors are reluctant to continue to invest. But we will see, because investors like the oil industry. When you can get a return on your money in less than a year, a payback, you like oil and gas. We'll see what happens.
Exactly. The future always prepare to the ones who can face an angle to solve the problems, the better returns. It's fascinating that you mentioned this, because nowadays we are, from the business side, everybody talks about environment, everybody talks about social and governance. But when they hear the word ESG, here at least in Texas, they begin to step back and say that it's only words but no action. And what I saw in other places is only environment but no governance, like giving compensation, the right compensation to the employees, or actually tying executive benefits to the metrics that companies can deliver. That's the challenge of today, but the challenge has been always omnipresent for people who have been in USA working, has been the benefits. I remember when you were giving us classes that you have a tenure in France. Can you tell us how was France?
Yeah, my career after the PhD started with 3 years in Alaska, of all places, at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where after 1 year there I actually became chair, very young assistant professor, chair of a new department in petroleum engineering that grew very fast, because timing is everything. And this was when 2 million barrels started coming down the Alaska pipeline. And the companies in Alaska actually were in favor of having graduates coming from University of Alaska. But After 3 years there, Schlumberger recruited me, and that's how I ended up going to France, which was very interesting because I often wondered, if you start with Alaska, where do you go from there as a career? I hadn't thought about France. That was a pretty nice next step. So I did spend 3 years in the 80s in France, then came back to the US for a few years, and then went back to France again. So the first time I was in France, the dollar was very strong, and it was very comfortable to work there. The second time when the dollar was weak, it was a little different, but I'd go back to France in a heartbeat. Actually, I enjoyed it a lot.
That's a very wonderful story. I know nowadays a lot of people really wants to ponder not only salaries but benefits. And a challenge that my generation faces, besides getting a good paid job, is also the benefits of parental leave and maternal leave. I wanted to bring the angle of France because they were more progressive on having a parental benefit than what is still going in USA.
Mm-hmm.
Even I remember a friend of us asked us how you managed to have kids in this industry, and I remember that you actually got the benefits of Schlumberger in France. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, yeah. Some of the benefits I was getting were a bit like expatriate benefits, although I wasn't in operations. So some Schlumberger jobs in operations actually compensated even more for expatriate. But still, they did cover, for example, the cost of school. So if you wanted to send your child to the American School of Paris, that's quite expensive, and Schlumberger helped out with that. But France, generally speaking, they tax you a lot. But when you or your child is sick, you are not going to go through the hurdles that you find here. Doctors that won't talk to you if you're not insured, or the first thing they want to know is how you're going to pay. None of that happens in France. And in fact, they even had doctors that would come to your home, which I had not seen since I was a kid. Because in the United States in the 50s, you still had doctors that would come to your home. But that went away. So, yes, you pay a lot in taxes, but it wards off a lot of the stress of what can be a sudden expense here in the United States. Different system.
We discuss right now two systems, the European and the quintessential American. And I remember that before you start teaching again, in your later years of Schlumberger, you were in Venezuela. So how was that experience? Did you learn some Spanish?
Oh, but it was difficult, the Spanish, because I lived in Caracas, and Caracas is a Caribbean Spanish. It's very fast, it's very slangy, so it was difficult for me. But when I would go in the mountains in Venezuela, or to Colombia, or Peru, Ecuador, other countries, if you go to the very north of Colombia, you get back to that Caribbean Spanish, but if you stay in the countries, they're speaking at a more reasonable pace. And I found that I could understand about 80%, and they could understand me about 80%. But when I was in Caracas, it was the opposite, about 20 and 20. Whatever I said, they don't get it. Whatever they say, I don't get it. So it's kind of funny. I had a Spanish teacher there from Argentina who knew no English, and we could communicate fine.
That's really nice.
Yeah, my Spanish wasn't perfect, but she could understand me, and I definitely could understand her. So
that's a very nice way to put an example for the definition of serendipity, when good things went together and assembled in a very nice way. You saw right there with your first eyes how was Venezuela before everything that
Before
known
Chavez,
nowadays.
I left just before Chavez was elected, actually.
And there was PDVSA and also Intepec. Correct me if I am wrong.
Oh yeah. So PDVSA had probably the best training program maybe in the whole world, and that's what drew my husband there. My job was actually with Schlumberger, but he was doing training for PDVSA, and I did some then and after. And yeah, I don't know, things fell apart under Chavez for PDVSA. Too bad, because the technology there was very strong, and a lot of very well-trained Venezuelans left the country. So the rest of the world, it's our game.
Yeah, it's true. I remember in my days when I was doing petroleum engineering in Ecuador, I always heard the gossip that the very few can actually go to get their postgraduate degrees in Venezuela because the English was a barrier and also the dollar was a barrier back then. And if you somehow, some way happen to get the opportunity to go to UT Austin, Texas A&M or Stanford, take it. Even if you have to pay years back, it's an experience and a level of knowledge that you cannot find because few of the people that were in Venezuela actually went to USA. So it was like a second tier or even third tier of access that for the region was always difficult to quantify because there were not so many back then. There was not so much internet back then in the early 2000s. And I can only help but think about the talent that nowadays tries to find new knowledge. Talking about knowledge, tell us about what is going on in the University of Houston, the place that you are right now.
Oh, many things. University of Houston is nearly 50,000 students right now. I don't think people appreciate how much it's grown, because when I was first working there, it was more like 25,000, so it doubled over the 10 years or so I was at Texas A&M. So there are a lot of strengths about the University of Houston. My current interests, because of some of the comments I made earlier about the progress of the energy industry, if you will, and what's happening potentially to oil and gas and fossil fuels in general, has interests me to move more towards carbon management, and we have a Carbon Management and Energy Center at the University of Houston. We also have a CCUS hub, so a carbon capture, utilization, and storage hub that's sponsored in part by the Department of Energy. The Hobby School has strengths in energy policy. Of course, many other things. There are many strengths. I guess I'm kind of cataloging what I know about the energy picture because it's what I can relate to directly. But there's very good strengths also in biomolecular engineering and battery development and computers and electrical engineering, and as well, U of H is perhaps one of the most diverse student bodies you can find. I mean, there may be more diverse. I think I can name, I have heard one other name, but it's up there, might be second, because Houston is so diverse. So this has a very interesting effect on the University of Houston as well. I would say a very positive effect. So in the social sciences, in policy and sociology, very strong there too.
I remember a quote that appeared in a magazine almost 7 years ago that If you want to see where America is going to be, you better look at Houston and how diverse and how thriving it is. Because the only way you can relate here is not to apply stereotypes, but to become a better human being and treating others as human beings. That's the key for diversity. The level of respect is always mutual when you treat people as humans. That goes back to another angle that I wanted to bring to you. Kuala Lumpur. I hear people that say that Kuala Lumpur is one of the most diverse cities in Southeast Asia. And I want to ask from you and your experience in the oil and gas industry and also your colleagues, what do you think about Kuala Lumpur?
I only went there once, but I had a wonderful time there. I did catch the nature of the diversity there. One of the things I'll never forget, we went to several different Indian restaurants. In Houston, we're starting to get this actually. We're starting to see that Indian restaurant could be a number of different things, just like Chinese restaurant. And what these different things are, as I said, they relate to what region of China or India. China and India both have a great number of people, in the billions of people. And they're very big land areas. So there's a lot of variety. And KL captures this, much like Houston does. But they did, even the many years ago when I went there. And I think it's kind of emerging more here in Houston. Of course, they are closer to the Asian cuisines and cultures. So I guess it makes sense that it might evolve there sooner than here. But you're going to love that part of what goes on in KL.
Yes, even I was surprised to see that many people have even competitions of cars. Here you have the big SUVs. Sometimes you are Team Cadillac, or sometimes you are Team General Motors. They also happen to have SUVs right there in the big size, and I was surprised to see. It's like I cannot escape from that battle. I better face it. I better face it.
I don't remember this aspect actually, but you're probably right. But it's very cosmopolitan in KL.
Mm-hmm. As the year is drawing an end for 2021, which are your visions for 2022?
Well, I'm very concerned for the United States, and I don't think it's limited to the United States. There are some very alarming trends. So most days I have more than one moment where I start to wonder whether should I just retire and try to work on these issues that are going on here. I guess the most important issue to me is the sense that people are making money persuading people that they can't trust anymore our elections. I mean, it's fundamental here. This is a democracy, and if we are going to erode that, this is very, very alarming. And some of the same people, by the way, are also making money misinforming people about the nature of the pandemic, about COVID. And this is killing people. So it's alarming. And the encouragement that we need vigilantes, this is killing people here. It's not funny. So I don't know. I mean, I have my technical interests. I hope I will pursue them. But if I finally decide nope, more important is figuring out how to be sure that my Texas friends their votes will count and that nobody will try to manipulate that. I don't know. I'm very concerned, I gotta say.
Hmm. It's a valid concern because if we talk about democracy and the free will to choose, freedom itself is a very fresh concept. Humans have been in the planet Earth for almost 10,000 years, and the last 240 years there has been a concept called freedom, independence. So for some, it's still a little offensive that they can believe other people can choose and vote on their free will. It's still a fresh concept for them. But for people who is already used to, democracy and representation is elemental. It's basic right now in this day and age, especially in other parts of the world.
Well, it is here, and I understand that we cannot force our cultural values and strategies on other countries. Fine. But I do not want to live under a dictator here.
Mm-hmm.
Do not.
Absolutely. Everybody knows that all dictators end really bad. It's not fun. It's like everybody wants to be a narc. Yeah, the narcs don't live long. Everybody knows that. So it's.
Well, you mentioned Venezuela. I mean, it's ruined that country.
Talking about places you have been in the past, like Venezuela, France, Alaska, California, Kansas. Which would be the advice for your younger self? If you have the opportunity to travel in time, which advice you would give to that younger Christine?
It's hard to imagine changing anything. Those of us that get as far as I have in life and still keep some optimism, I guess we accept what we have done. Even if there could have been some bumps in the road here and there, you just keep growing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whatever you confront helps you grow. So no, I don't know that I would advise me at age 35 or 40 to change something. I don't think so.
Maybe a tip in a time or something. Yeah, it's really hard because nobody knows. First, can we recognize ourselves in the future? And second, is that person really telling us the truth? In the end, it's up to us.
I think you just have to learn to go with the flow where you can and where you feel like you can and would like to try to influence things a bit in a positive way. Then you're going to feel better if you do it. I think so. Like I say, if I get frustrated enough, I may have to change what I'm doing. We'll see.
I have to say this has been a wonderful time. I really appreciate the opportunity that we have to discuss, taking advantage of the view, taking advantage of the moment in time, and with a fantastic view from the city of Houston. We bid very well for everybody who's watching this. So stay connected, and we'll be right back for more of what you like. So see you when I see you. Bye.
Bye.